Hey, and welcome to another main contained fishing podcast. As always, powered by Z Pro for serious power for serious anglers. In today's episode, what we're going to be discussing is kayak bass fishing, the dog days of summer here in Southeast Georgia. So stay tuned for the episode that we're about to bring you. Hey, and welcome back to the show with your host, Daniel Woodcock. Hey, the dog days of summer are among us here in Southeast Georgia. It is hot, humid, and muggy. So what times are best to fish for the bass that you want to catch out of your kayak here in Southeast Georgia during these dog days of summer, right? Well, we as anglers love to catch big bass, right? And it's just fishing the heat here in South Georgia is awful. You know, you can't be on the water from about 10 o'clock to about 3 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's just humid, muggy. Man, you'd be sweating your butt off, smelling like swamp water when you come home, things like that. So I find best is there's three times or I wouldn't say times, but 3 areas in each day that I think that are great fishing for the heat of the dog days of summer. And that is early morning. You know, you getting on the water probably around 5:30 before that sun comes up, and throwing some topwater baits. Bass love topwater here in South Georgia. And it's just my perfect time is from about 5 to 9. I just love fishing that 4-hour window here and throwing topwater, you know, buzz baits, poppers, golly spooks, the good old whopper plopper. But yeah, I just love a topwater bite. Who doesn't like a topwater bite, man? Them explosions you get sometimes, or you get that big fish that just comes up and just slurps it. I have found that early morning bite window is good for me. It might not be good for you. Depends on what area of the U.S. you're in. But here in Georgia, where I fish mostly, is a 5 to 9 bite window. Even fishing on full moons and new moons and whatever you want to fish on. But yeah, another thing is evening fishing. You know, you get all your honeydews done around the house throughout the day, and then you load up your kayak, hit that old country road, and off to the swamp you go, right? Or what I call the backwater. Hit it about 5, you know, even hitting about 5 o'clock in the afternoon and fishing till dark. Here, dark don't get to around 9:15 at the dog days of summer. But yeah, it's evening fishing is good too. You know, I still use a lot of topwater baits in the afternoon when the sun starts cresting down, going down. I like throwing big worms during the summer. Big worms is a must. You know, 10-inch or longer. A lot of the water I fish here in the backwater is dark water. So, you know, black, blues, pinks, pink worms, red worms, June bug, whatever dark dark color baits that you like to use. I like to use curly tails. I've used trick worms, straight tail worms, whatever you want to call them. Sinkos, if you want to go to a little more lower, subtle kind of worm, a Senko is good, or a stick bait, whatever you want to call it. But, you know, the most exciting time to fish here under these heat advisory days is at night. You know, you're getting on the water probably about 9:30, 10 o'clock. You're fishing throughout the night. You know, your visibility isn't real well, but your hearing has to be, especially fishing at nighttime. Is you're throwing top water. You know, you're making a loud top water splash with these baits. I can't get away from a buzz bait at night. We used to tell you a little story about when I was in college. When I was in college, there was a guy that I met from Kentucky. He was a big bass fisherman, and we used to hit this golf course pond, which is just down the road from our campus in Douglas, Georgia, where I went to college at. And he loved to throw a buzz bait at night. Man, you hear that thing just across the water, boom, a big splash. Man, we used to catch some toads out that pond. You know, the golf course guys would let us fish it after dark. You know, just ask people if you can fish their things after dark. There are a lot of farm ponds here in the southeast. A lot of farmers. If you just go ask the farmer, he'd probably let you fish it. But yeah, nighttime after sunset into the early morning is just a prime time. Oh God, you got to make sure you carry some bug spray for sure. These mosquitoes down here tote you off. They're like aircraft carriers and big airplanes, just kind of swoop you down and take you off. But yeah, talking more about nighttime fishing. I had a podcast with Chad Hoover earlier in the year, and he was talking about nighttime fishing in Lake Eufaula, I think Gunnersville, stuff like that over in Alabama. And he was talking about when you nighttime fishing, you know, your night vision, you know, if you got electronics or lights running on your boat or your kayak, it kind of messes up your nighttime vision. But if you take them things and turn them off and just go back to the old school way of fishing, right? No electronics, no lights, and just take a paddle and just kind of ease your way around the pond, the little small lake, or even up a creek or a river. It's just magnificent to just kind of take all that in at night. But yeah, it's my favorite bait. Like I said, my favorite baits to throw at night are, you know, a buzz bait, poppers, something that makes noise. Whopper ploppers. It's because bass tend to hone in on that movement and that large vibration, especially at night, because nighttime feeding is huge, you know, for bass around the hot parts of the day. They kind of find deep holes and a lot of shade, a lot of offshore structure to get into to stay cool. They'll hug the bottom. You know, you might catch some bass out in deep water that has a mud. I call it a mud belly, because they'll get down in that mud and where it's cool and just kind of hang tight there. They'll have that mud belly. But yeah, it's summertime overall is a good time to go fishing. It's you don't have to worry about wearing a whole lot of clothes like you do in the wintertime, or even some of the fishermen up north. Fall time. They're already putting on their winter clothes, their hoodies, their long sleeves, their thermals slash what we call down here in the South long johns. But yeah, it's a good time to fish. Not only for bass. Going back to my roots, it's just I love to brim fish sometimes. It ain't nothing like catching a big Ogeechee River red breast, bring them, as we call them, down here on a floating court with a little cricket floating in it, or a spin dandy with a cricket on it, or some topwater bugs. But yeah, it's just overall, summertime is a great time to fish. And I love fishing in the summertime, even though I sweat to death. I get out there and be drenched in about 2 hours. But yeah, it's talking about the baits. I talked to them. I mentioned them earlier in the podcast. A buzz bait, or poppers, things like that. It's just, I think it's the vibration, especially when you're talking about nighttime fishing and early morning fishing before the sun comes up. The baits that cause the large vibrations, I think, is what triggers bass to hit it, or to bite it. Fishing of the buzz bait is one of my go-to as a top water, because that's what I was raised on, is throwing buzz baits and poppers. Only a couple years back was the whopper plopper invented and brought to the market, things like that. But yeah, it's buzz baits. I tell you which buzz bait I throw. I throw a JSB Customs buzz bait. The guy here locally makes them for me. If you go over on the Instagram, Facebook, look up JSB Custom Baits, you'll find his buzz baits. He not only makes buzz baits, but spinner baits as well. But I just like the way that his blade's tuned, coming out the packet. I fish, the purple, the black, and the white. And I'm thinking about going to a pink. I spoke with a guy named Jay down at ICAST at a Spike It booth. And he tuned me in on something that I never thought of. He fishes a lot of pink baits, worms, spinner baits, buzz baits. He even dyes his frogs pink, the whole frog pink. That's another good bait to throw at night, is a frog, either a popping frog or anything like that. I forgot about that one. But yeah, it's we talked at ICAST for a short minute, and I think he's onto something, because not a whole lot of people throw pink stuff, right? But in dark water, pink really, really shines, I believe, because I've caught, in the Ogeechee River here, we throw a lot of weightless Texas rig pink trick worms. And I never thought about taking a frog and dipping it pink, or having a totally pink buzz bait. JSB Customs, we might have to make a custom pink buzz bait, pink blade, pink skirt, pink head. I'll reach out to you. But yeah, it's I think that's a sleeper color in dark water. is pink. Or muddy water. I really think it would shine as well. But moving on, I can get down a rabbit hole about top water and what baits are best, what baits aren't, things like that. But big worms, big worms. I like, a lot of these guys throw these big worms on Texas rigs, on Carolina rigs. I throw them on a Texas rig, a peg Texas rig at that, on an 1/8 ounce. Maybe even a little larger weight. But big worms tend to get big bites here in Georgia during the hot summer months, because you're dragging that thing along the bottom. You're putting it in front of their face, and they don't have to move very far to kind of slurp it in. It has a larger profile, so they say, "Oh my God, that's a good good prey to eat on," because in some fisheries down here in Georgia we have eels, and I think that's what kind of triggers the bass's head. His brain is, it has that long, slender body like an eel. So they're saying, "Oh, that's a good meal for the evening. I only have to eat one time, and I don't have to move very far when it's drug in front of their face." But yeah, it's a no-brainer. You throw in these big top water baits, big worms, big popping frogs, things like that. But yeah, I think overall, the areas I would target as a kayak bass fisherman, being in a plastic boat, even if you went up to a John boat or a big bass boat, I don't care. But some of the fisheries I fish, they have boat docks on them. Boat docks is a great way to catch fish during the summertime, because it does two things. Each pillar on, if you look at a dock, especially if you have a walkway, then you have a good sized dock. These fish are hunting shade. So with the bass, you could have a twig sticking out the water. That bass thinks it's hid under that twig. I learned this from Brian Latimer school that I went to. That I fished his championship on Lake St. Clair. He was talking about it, that fish, bass in particular, will get behind the skinniest thing and thinks he's hid, because it casts that shadow. And but yeah, boat docks throw a whole lot of shadows, right? You're talking about each post has a shadow, each cross member that holds them posts together have shadows. Then you're talking about the platform itself, the walking platform, the whatever where you hoist your boat up at has big shelters on it. So them fish will get under there, because that's where most of you, if you really look at it, docks are built in shallow. It goes from shallow water to kind of medium deep water. And if you especially live on big reservoirs or even small ponds that people have docks built on for their family to go out on and kind of catch brim, that's what I'm getting at, is brim tend to hang around the docks as well. And if the brim hang around the docks, guess what else is going to hang around the docks? Bass. Because it's an easy meal. They don't have to go far. And it just supplies them cover, supplies them shade, cooler water. I wouldn't say cooler water, but the temperatures are less hot than being out there in no man's land. But yeah, docks would be a good place to start. Throwing a Texas rig, throwing a topwater frog, buzz baits, poppers, popping frogs, things like that. Secondly is lily pads. Who doesn't like to fish a lily pad, right? I think as fishermen, bass fishermen in particular, if we go to a place and we've never been and we look across the pond or the lake and say, well, that's where I'm starting at because of lily pads, right? I like fishing lily pads myself, throwing top water, frogs, even if the lily pads aren't so thick, you can throw a buzz bait as well. But you get on the edges of them lily pads, you can throw some Texas rig stuff. You can still throw the buzz baits. You can throw something that mimics a brim, because brim also live under lily pads as well. That's why I think that's where a lot of people mistake that brim don't spawn under lily pads. But if I was a brim, that's where I would spawn at, because it has tremendous amount of shade. Not a whole lot of predator fish. I think bass tend to look at where they can get the easiest meal and not have to move as much. A bass isn't going to swim. It's going to swim 2 or 3 miles to go get a meal. Usually, I call them resident bass, where they talk. I've heard fishermen talking about residence bass. You can go catch a residence bass around docks, rocks, things like that, because bass tend to have a pattern throughout the seasons, but I don't think they travel. Like, I don't think one fish is going to travel 3 to 4 miles up a channel just because he can swim that far. But that's just my opinion. I wouldn't mind doing that, like tagging some fish and maybe doing a study on them to see, especially in ponds. I think fish tend, if it's a smaller pond, they're going to use the whole pond. But if you got say you got a 20 plus acre body of water, if you catch one fish in one area, does it travel to another area? That would be cool to find out. That would be cool to, like they do, like they track sharks up and down the coast. It's just kind of weird thinking about that you could do that with bass. But yeah, deep structure. Talking about deep structure, I'm talking about anything maybe, maybe 15 to 25, 30 foot deep structure. A lot of these man-made reservoirs, they left rocks and they just dump trees and things down there. But finding deep structure during the summertime is hard to do without electronics, first of all, unless you just know the body of water and have seen that before it was filled up. So I think fishing deep structure, you're throwing Carolina rigs, you're throwing Texas rigs, deep crankbaits on that structure. I think you'll be able to catch some fish during the summer if you find the deep structure. I use a Humminbird Helix 7, down imaging, side imaging, traditional sonar. It helps you locate deep structure, especially if you get into a place that has a lot of submerged timber, cut off timber. It kind of shows you you can kind of pinpoint on that side imaging. Well, there's a fish on that stump. There's two fish on this stump. So you can kind of go start picking them apart and finding out what they want. Hitting deep crankbaits off the sides of the stump might trigger a bite, or just dragging a big Texas rig worm. So, but yeah, this is my take on summertime fishing here in Georgia. I don't, I don't travel a whole lot to fish. And most of the fisheries here in Georgia are great fisheries. You just got to know how to fish it during the summer months. And I think if we even broke it down more during the summer months, you really, Georgia's beginning to get into the hottest parts. We fish the summer months, July, August, September. With other parts, September, October might be getting in their fall fishing. But here in Georgia, particularly for me, being from the southeast part of the United States, we have summer temperatures all the way through September. It can't even go in a couple weeks of October. I have been fishing in October, and it's still 80, 90 degrees. But it's just, I think it's a good time to catch some big fish. It is when you start looking at the morning time, evening time, into the nighttime. It's just, you just got to find where they're hanging out during that time of day. Are the fish feeding early in the morning? Are they feeding in the early evening? Are they, especially full moon nights, these fish are feeding on a full moon during the nighttime. So you really have to get on the water each time and kind of figure out, okay, I'm fishing on a full moon. They're not biting in the early morning. They're not biting early evening. So let me try nighttime fishing. So it's just my take on, like I said before, on how I would fish here in Georgia during the hot summer months, and what baits I would throw, and what you can kind of limit your tackling your kayak, because you can say, okay, well, I'm not going to be throwing a spinner bait. I'm not going to be throwing a shaky head. I'm not going to be throwing big swim baits. So you can kind of go to like a 3-rod setup. I mean, something you can throw a Texas rig on, something you can throw top water on for your buzz baits, frogs, poppers, and then something you throw big worms on. So it's you might get away with 2 rods if you don't mind retying on different baits. But I would probably go to a 3-rod setup and just look for, if you got boat docks on your place, if you got lily pads, if you got, offshore structure, or, structure that's around the edges of the waterway, down trees, things like. And talking about structure is, if you know where all the crappy fishermen took all their Christmas trees, I would probably start there. That's just a hint. If you can mark them, if you see them people, go out there during the wintertime and watch them, or early spring, and see where they're catching crappie at. There's probably some offshore structure somewhere, or maybe some close structure to the bank during the springtime for crappie, because that's where they like to spawn at. But yeah, it's just this is just my take of how I would kayak bass fish during the dog days of summer here in Georgia. And we're just thankful enough to have some good weather year round here in Georgia to golly, to fish year round. You know, I wouldn't know what to do if I had 3 or 4 inches of snow on the ground during the wintertime and not been able to fish, because talking about winter fishing later on, but yeah, it's the dog days of summer are among us here in Georgia, and we just got to find new ways to catch fish. And I think breaking it down into 3 areas as early morning, evening, nighttime fishing is the best bet. So if you want to talk a little bit more about summertime fishing, you can reach out to me. I'll go ahead and throw my credentials out there. You can email me at daniel.segkbf.com. I'll be glad to talk with you, get you set up, fishing here in Georgia, getting you catching bass here in Georgia. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on YouTube. All the social platforms you can find me on. Just look up. I have a personal Facebook, Daniel Woodcock. If you are into kayak bass fishing, make sure you like and follow my page, SC Georgia Kayak Bass Fish on Facebook. And if you like watching videos, if you're coming down to Georgia, interested in kayak bass fishing, you can go over to my YouTube channel. I've got some great places there that you can watch some video content. Southeast Georgia Kayak Bass Fishing on YouTube. Make sure you like, subscribe when you go over to YouTube. Just on the back end, our first podcast on the Paddle and Fin Network goes live next Thursday, which will be, I think, August 8th. That is our first live podcast on the Paddle and Fin Network. If you don't already subscribe to them, you can find them on Facebook. You can find them on Instagram. You can find them on Spotify, YouTube. There's a great group of anglers that put out some great content from around the nation. So if you're a traveling fisherman or if you're just vacationing to certain areas, you can look them up. They can kind of give you the ins and outs, reach out to them. I just wanted to say thank you again, Paddle and Fin Network, for inviting me as a podcast host on your platform. And you can find them on Waypoint TV as well. So if you go on your Roku TV or your streaming devices, type in Waypoint TV, download the app, and you will find all their podcasts right there on Waypoint TV. And as always, wear your PFD and fish on, and see y'all on the next show.